You can't do an instacker on less than 140x. Instackers just won't feel good until you've invested at least 100x. Instackers have a massive ceiling, but they start very, very low to the ground. I've heard many times while creating this character that unless I was willing to pay for it, it was going to be a bad experience. I did not want to believe what I was hearing, because from my perspective of playing PoE, there is generally always a less expensive solution to something. If a build is so extremely good at a high budget, often it is the case it can also be good on a lower budget. I sought to prove this case, originally with what I believe would be a very doable challenge of making a good instacker on less than 140x. I put together the character's gear from the previous videos for roughly around 50x, and from my perspective, the character fulfilled the requirement of being good by being able to clear endgame bosses quite easily while having a smooth and fun mapping experience to boot. But good is a very subjective term, so I'll let you decide on that whether or not it was good. You can make up your own opinions. Now, in my opinion, 50x is still a very sizable chunk of cash, and no easy task to acquire. So I have asked myself, how much of that cost can I strip out of the build while still making a quite solid, well-rounded build? Today's character you're looking at was collectively 14.3x in cost. I kept track of all the currency I spent and wrote it all down to get an accurate measure for how much this current variant of the build cost me. On 14x, there are some noticeable downgrades from the previous version. We lost 1.5 thousand energy shield. That's a big loss. A good amount of damage and some feels good defensive layers like energy shield on hit, as well as being unaffected by curses. These are some hefty cuts to the previous character, but it still leaves the character intact to do all the content, minus maybe the feared. We might be just shy of having enough DPS for that fight in particular. All in all, for 14x, I'd say it's a pretty good result, considering it is a character you can continue to upgrade in large ways to come. Probably not the best character you can make for 14x, but I'd say, you know, it's competitive, it does a good job, and it's not a reason to not do an instacker in my opinion, as it's still pretty good. Now, I want to go in game to break down methods we use to cut costs while maintaining as much strength as possible. Now that we're in game, let's talk ways I chose to save money on this character, where I cut some cost while also trying to maintain as much of a good character as possible. Now, to start off with, when we're looking at the helmet, right away, there's an obvious difference here. We're using a Solaris circlet, which is like a T2, T3 base, versus a Hubris circlet, which is a T1 base. When I looked at trade, this is something you can always do when you're copying a big meta build or something where the prices have skyrocketed. You can look for a worse than normal base where you're going to lose some value. You are going to lose some value, but you're going to also cut the cost significantly. The price for a level 75 to 79 Hubris circlet with power charge enchant, I think it just didn't really exist on the market, or it was extremely expensive, whereas a tier 2 base, I was able to pick up the Solaris circlet for 12c. I thought that was a fantastic buy. There were a couple other helmets that were similar, you know, they were T2 bases for 40, 30c, and I'm sure throughout the day there'd be other ones that would come online, stuff like that. So that's one way you can do it. You can check for bases that are less expensive, so we save money there. Another thing we did to save money is its series reflection. I love this shield. It's a great shield for quality of life, unaffected by curses, but it costs like 5x, 6x. I don't know what price it is currently, but when I got it, it was like 5x. That's a pretty expensive upgrade. I thought, you know what, for the budget I'm trying to shoot for, which I was trying to shoot for around 10x, spending 50% of it on a Zer's Reflection, probably not the play. So instead, I looked for a shield that I could get crafted pretty easily. I went for a fractured lightning damage base because I still wanted to maintain some damage on the character. If I'm going to lose the percent damage craft on my wand, I want to try to pick it up on my shield, was my thought process. So I went for a fractured lightning damage base shield. You could also go for a shield that's already crafted with ES and spell damage, or ES and lightning damage, stuff like that existed, which is probably the way I should have ended up going, considering I settled on not a very good craft. Like, I just chucked a couple dense fossils on it and called it a day. But that's what we were looking for here. We were looking for a shield that would give us some ES and give us some damage back, while giving up the fact we would give up some res, some unaffected by curses. We lost some quality of life there. So it's unfortunate, but it's part of the things you got to do when you're cutting budget. Another thing we did is on our shield, or not our shield, on our boot craft, we gave up elusive on crit. So you'll see the difference between these two boots is pretty much just elusive on crit. These ones are a little bit better res, but for the most part, they were pretty much the same cost initially. Like buying a boot base with almost 100 res or over 100 res and tier 1 int, when I've checked both times buying these boots and these boots, there are a lot of pairs in between the 10 to 50C range, a ton of them. I bought this pair for 10C, and I just crafted movement speed cannot be chilled. If you're going to go for the elusive, you're going to spend an extra 2x crafting. Well, first you slam it with a Redeemer's Orb, which is like 1.5x, and then another 2x crafting, suffixes can't be changed, reforge crit. So as you can see, there's another 3x, 3 to 4x cost difference between these two pairs of boots. So saving money there. We lost elusive, which is unfortunate, but it's part of the things you got to do when you're trying to cut costs. You got to pick where can I take away some things and gain some currency back. The first thing I cut, which I should have gone over this to begin with, is Emperor's Wit. It's an extremely rare jewel. It's extremely expensive, and it doesn't give you that much more than a rare jewel. I will admit, it gives you more than a rare jewel is, but not that much worth. Not that much more than a rare jewel. Out of all my gearing on the 50x character, this is probably the first thing I would drop / not get. I got it just because, you know, I've never had an Emperor's Jewel in a build before, and I was like, yeah, I have some currency. I'll buy an Emperor's Wit. But personally, this is the first thing I would have dropped. It was like 13x, very expensive, would have easily doubled the cost of this character for a very small, minute upgrade. So that's obviously one of the first things we cut. Another thing we cut, which is similar in price. This was 10x to get a energy shield on hit, discipline, or maybe it was 9x. I can't quite remember. Point is, it was still a very expensive upgrade. The difference between this and this is huge. This 9x upgrade, I think, is very worth it. It gives you a whole bunch of quality of life and survivability. It feels great. It's a game changer. This, however, is just like, hey, we do a little bit more damage, we have a little bit more ES, whereas this is a game changer in how the build feels and plays in terms of, hey, I can stand here and kind of tank the Shaper Beam because I'm getting so much regen from this Watcher's Eye. This thing, on the other hand, just a little bit higher number, not as crazy of a difference. Now, if you love character size, then maybe it's a different story, but in my opinion, something like a Watcher's Eye, discipline on hit, that's a huge upgrade for 9x, and it's kind of worth the money, whereas this thing would not be worth the money. Now, I cut both of these out of the build because obviously, if I'm trying to spend a build or make a build that costs close to 10x, I can't include a 10x jewel because then I wouldn't be able to afford any other gear pieces. Unnatural Instinct, this is something we would include in the Scion version of the build. Since I went Deadeye, we didn't really need it, or we didn't have a good place to put it anyways, so that's something big we were cutting out of the build. I think these are like 5x or something. I don't know exactly what Unnatural Instincts are at this point of the league, so we dropped that. Another thing we dropped is looking at our wand. A wand would require an Awakener Orb craft to make a decent min-max version of the wand. That's expensive. There could be things that go wrong when you do the Awakener Orb, where you have to do prefixes can't be changed, you have to scour. There's crafting cost additional on top of that. The difference between crafting a wand that's this good and a wand that's buying off the market, this was 30C, whereas this wand cost me, I want to say it costs close to 10x in crafting. You know, you include the Awakener's Orb, you include the suffixes can't be changed, you include the Ashling, you include... Well, eventually I was planning to do like to get a similar wand to this, you would just do a multi-mod scenario, which is what I'll recommend in the guide when I go over crafting advice for it. But point is, this is a 10x craft, and it is a sizable amount better than this wand here, but this is 30C. The difference between this wand and this wand, it's not the difference in an item that's 30 times better, okay? If it costs a 30th of the cost and gives you 80% of the value, 70% of the value, you know, it's a solid way to go, and that's what we went with here, you know? Just bought a wand with the lightning damage affix, and we're just trying to go with okay suffixes, like attack speed or crit chance on it, and then just craft one or the other. If it's on an okay base, like an imbued wand, we're gonna be sitting pretty. So we cut costs there. Another way we cut costs is on our belts, amulet, and helmet. On all of these items, instead of crafting with deafening essences of spite, which cost closer to 12, 13, 14C a pop, we crafted with shrieking, which cost 5C a pop. So we're cutting about 50 to 70% of the cost in terms of how much essences would cost us to craft these items for us to just get decent okay affixes. So we save money there. Granted, that'll lose us, you know, 5 to 7, 8 int on every single item where we craft with essences, but I think it was worth the trade-off of being able to throw more essences to get other decent affixes on the items, in terms of crafting on a budget, that's something you can look to do, is look to craft with the cheaper cost crafting currencies. Another thing I want to draw attention to when it comes to crafting with these essences, you'll notice, I mean, I'll include these notes in the POB of this character in the description, but you'll notice a lot of times while I was doing this crafting, I would hit something that was just okay. I threw 2 essences at it, I hit okay multi on my amulet and an open prefix. It really isn't that good of an amulet, but I said, that's good enough. And that's one thing that you're going to want to do a lot of times when you're trying to craft on a budget. You have to see if you hit something that's good enough to work, to just accept it and be okay with that. And then later on at a later date, you'll grab a second item that you can craft on to try to hit something more min-maxed, something that's a little bit better, something that achieves your goals better. But when you're trying to do things on a budget, you have to be okay with accepting things that aren't perfect, that aren't like the best in the world. And for me, that was things like, hey, I would hit multi, open prefix. I was like, you know what, that's good enough. Multi is some damage, open prefix, I can craft percent energy shield. I'm happy with that. For the helmet base, it was like, hey, if I hit okay ES, that I can craft another flat ES mod onto, that's good enough for me to go on to the next step. For my belt, it's like, if I hit okay res, I'm good at stopping there. I'm good on going on to the next thing. You'll notice I do this throughout these notes. If you end up reading through to see all the things I spent money on, you'll notice I did that I did it a lot. A lot of times would be, I get to an item, I hit okay mods, and I just say, that is good enough. And I highly recommend doing this if you're trying to do something on a budget. Try to get a good perspective of where is acceptable, where is the baseline of this can get me to the point where, you know, the build works, I'm capping my res, let's get it to operational, then grab secondary bases to craft on to min-max and upgrade from. You'll have a great baseline to work with, and you'll have a character that's functional type of thing. So that's what I did for my amulet slot, my ring slot, my belt slot, and my glove slot. Ultimately, I just hit things that were okay, and I went with it. Now, there are things where I did have some regrets. For example, on my glove slot, I crafted these with essences on a fractured base. The gloves I ended up with were really not that good. They ended up costing me about 70C. I regret not just buying I could have very easily thrift shop and found an item that was better than this for less money than 70C. And that's on me. That's on me because I thought I could be cute with it, get a fractured base, and hit something better. And I was risking it. And because I risked it, I ended up with a worse item. That's on me. There's things like that where definitely check your options for both buying an item and trying to craft an item. Same thing with the shield is I probably could have ended up making a better shield for less money by just buying it. Always check the trade site, set up some good filters to try to thrift shop for decent items. That's always going to be your number one option to find the best item for the least amount of currency generally. Okay, moving on. There are other things you can do to save money. Looking back at the helmet, there are guaranteed ways to force specific affixes you want. For example, on a helmet base, the hunter mods for the suffixes are all level 80 requirement except for percent intelligence. You can hit T2% intelligence at level 68 of a helmet and T1% intelligence at level 75 of a helmet. So when I was looking at this helmet, I knew that if I had a helmet between 75 and 79, that if I was hunter exalting it on a suffix, I was guaranteed to hit percent intelligence. It's hard to make a helmet that has int, a good energy shield base, and percent intelligence just randomly chucking essences at it. But if you chuck essences at it just trying to hit intelligence plus energy shield, and then you hunter slam, you're guaranteeing yourself that result. So there's scenarios like this where you can force on good results. I don't recommend buying the helmets off trade. If somebody's listing a helmet with intelligence, percent intelligence, and okay energy shield for 30x, they're screwing you. Okay, this helmet cost me like 2x to craft, 3x to craft. It's not an expensive craft to do. There are better ways to do it, and that's what I'd recommend investigating, is things like this. I'll go over crafting methods for things like the helmet. I also did a similar thing when crafting my chest piece. For your chest piece, a Crusader Slam onto a suffix, if it's level 75, in between 75 and 79, you have a 50% chance to hit percent intelligence. So what I ended up doing is I would acquire chest pieces that had okay energy shield, some int on it, and then I would go for a Crusader Slam. And that would give me either a 50% chance to hit percent intelligence if it was between 75 and 79 on the item level, or if it was like item level 80 plus, it would be a 1 in 3 chance to hit percent intelligence. So you'll notice in my notes, I end up missing intelligence twice. I take the 1 in 50 chance, or the 1 in 2 chance, I take the 1 in 3 chance, and then I take a 1 in 2 chance again, and finally I hit percent intelligence. That's another thing you can do, is look at your options for crafting a chest piece. It's always a good idea to start out with a chest piece with good energy shield, good intelligence, and then throw a Crusader's Orb at it. That's my preferred way to craft a high int chest piece, where you can get good stats on it as well, because the idea of being able to hit good suffixes with good prefixes is generally very, very hard to do. So something like this is what I would recommend going for. Okay, moving on to other ways we saved money, let's look at our cluster jewels. I'm going to actually have to open up CraftFX, so I'm going to skip to that screen real quick here. Now, when it comes to crafting these cluster jewels, our goal was to hit a triple notable jewel. And we care about the mods like Opportunist Fuselage. We want this 100% on the jewel. It's a very good notable, 100% we want this. We also want either Feed the Fury or Fuel the Fight on a prefix. So that's what we have set up here. We have an either or set up for those. And we don't really care a ton about the outside notable. Generally, martial prowess is the best, and we do end up using that in our passive tree because it gives us a little bit of accuracy. You can get accuracy a couple other places, so it's not the end of the world to not hit it. But ideally, the main thing we care about is getting a third suffix notable, because any one of these will push both Fuel the Fight and Opportunistic Fuselage. It'll push the ones we care about most onto the travel notables. Now, you'll look at this, and I have it set up with serrated fossils. It's a 1 in 20. Now, an important thing to look at is all these jewels, they require item level 50 or item level 1 for all the affixes we're trying to possibly hit here. The important thing is, if you get a jewel that is below level 68, we end up taking out a lot of mods from the pool. So you'll see here, increased damage 3%, level 68. This is a mod we don't want to hit. And if it's in the level 68 pool, that means if we get a jewel that's level 67 or 50 to 67, we will be more likely to hit the ones we care about. So you see it's 1 in 20 now, with the item level being the highest. If we take this and we make it a level 52 jewel, all of a sudden it's a 1 in 11. We basically double our odds to hit the affixes we care about, because we're cutting out mods that would be stuff we don't want to hit. And things like this you can do a lot of times with cluster jewels. I would always recommend checking out the item levels for the various affixes you're trying to hit. Often there can be a good way to craft a good jewel. For me, this was a big win because the average cost of 11 serrated fossils is close to 60C, whereas looking at something like buying the triple notable we want, I think originally on the character I bought it for was like 2x. So it's 25% of the cost to do the crafting of this method versus spending 2x when I originally bought the jewels from random people on trade. So that's another way we went to save money, is we went and we looked at the crafting cost for some of the jewels, like the large cluster jewels. It saved us a ton of money going to craft these ourselves versus going to buy the jewels from somebody on trade. Another way we saved money, well, I don't know if we actually saved money this way. I ended up just buying my medium cluster jewels. I didn't look at the crafting costs because I felt like they weren't too expensive. I think when I was buying these mediums, they were like 30, 40C or something. They weren't too expensive, and I ended up just buying them because I didn't feel like it would be... I didn't think I would be able to craft them for much cheaper. I didn't even look because they didn't seem that expensive to begin with. So that's something you probably could look into. I didn't look into it. Maybe there's a cheaper way to craft these jewels, but for me, the mediums, they weren't very expensive to begin with, so I just bought them. Other things we did to save cost is for our Watcher's Eye. Obviously, we dropped the discipline on hit, and we just went for a Watcher's Eye that was cheap. Attack speed from precision was only 30C. I thought, you know, that's pretty solid. That's mostly going to be better than a jewel we could buy, like a rare jewel, because a rare jewel, we want a lot of attack speed on our jewels to begin with, and you can get up to 15% attack speed on a Watcher's Eye, which is better than you could get on a rare jewel with 6 and 8%, and then you can get percent ES on top of it. It's just a solid jewel for 30C. And then for other jewels, we basically just tried to shop around for jewels that had attack speed, they had attributes we needed, they had maybe resistances we needed, maybe some percent damage here, and that's what I did for pretty much all these jewels. I'll highlight over them real quick here just so you can see the jewels we bought, but in the description or in the notes or whatever, you'll see that, hey, I bought a rare jewel for 10C, 30C, 20C, 5C, whatever. There's just some decent stuff you can do. Shopping on a budget looking for 3 modules usually isn't too bad, and you get a lot of value from those. Other things we did is we decided, hey, we're not going to even get corruptions on our Fertile Mind. The downside of this is we don't have corrupted blood immunity. Personally, I would still recommend, if there's something you're going to spend a little bit extra money on, probably worth it to go get corrupted blood immunity on your fertile mines. You know, dying to corrupted blood just isn't really worth it. And so getting a fertile mind with like 20 int instead of 24 with the corrupted blood implicit, it's probably still the way to go. But that's another reason, another area where I just decided to cut budget. I wasn't sure how strict out of a budget I was going to go on, and these were the first things I bought. So I just went straight away to buying jewels without corruptions on them. You'll see here on my left thread of hope, I also don't have the corruption. Ultimately, though, picking up like hinder immunity, maim immunity, you cannot be silenced, there's things like that end up being like pretty high value, and usually they aren't too expensive to get on a corruption, with these jewels not being like super meta type of thing. You could probably shop around for those corruptions, but it's just another thing that I tried to do where I was like, okay, I'm going to save money, this is what I'm going to do. Other things we looked for saving money, actually, this ring and this ring, these aren't too different. I just bought Call of the Brotherhoods with percent intelligence. Now, my reasoning for doing this was I wanted to get enemies to freeze. I think it's a very safe mechanic to have to be freezing most enemies on screen. I think it makes the build play a lot better while mapping, and I thought it was worth it. Ultimately, this is probably a less single target sort of thing, but it's not too expensive to get a Call of the Brotherhood with percent intelligence, so I thought that was a good buy still on the medium budget setup. Other things we did is we just shopped around for our jewelry. When we're buying a ring, we want something that has decent intelligence. Wait, no, this is the ring I bought. What am I saying? I'm looking at these items aren't that different is the thing. The difference between this ring and this ring is very little. I think I spent maybe 40C buying this jewel, like just picking it up, and I think I spent maybe 25C buying this jewel. I can't remember exactly. Point is, you can get a pretty decent ring just thrift shopping around for a jewel with int plus another okay attribute or an okay res, open suffix type of thing. There's ways you can go where it still works out just fine. And I guess we didn't save much money there, but it wasn't that much expense to begin with for our ring slot. I think I covered most of the areas where, oh, here's another area we saved money on. We went for, originally, on the more min-max version, I went for Tranquility with Breath Stealers. This is a really good DPS option. If you need Energy Shield, though, you lose about 1,000 Energy Shield or something, because normally you can get a glove slot with like 200 ES. It's a decent amount of a defensive cut for offensive gain. Kind of up to you if you want to make that decision, but for us, to anoint Tranquility would be multiple extra golden oils. The glove slot itself for a Breath Stealer was like 30-40C or something. I decided it would be just cheaper to go with one of these. Ultimately, it's probably not that much cheaper, but for me, I wanted to have a little bit extra ES because I knew I was going to be losing Energy Shield on this build, because we lose Energy Shield from our chest piece, we lose Energy Shield from having less int, and I didn't want to lose even more to get Breath Stealers on the build. I still wanted to have a decent amount of Energy Shield threshold to be able to tank and not get one shot so much. So that's the reason I opted to not get Tranquility, besides the fact it was a little bit more expensive as well. I think I've covered the majority of the cost here. Oh, one other thing I did to save money. I'm not sure how expensive Anomalous Power Siphon is, but a level 21 Power Siphon was only 3 Chaos, and it gives you the additional projectile you would get from Anomalous Power Siphon anyways. So ultimately, I would recommend going with like a level 21 Power Siphon until you can afford Anomalous, because with Anomalous, you want to end up doing the thing where you buy a bunch of them and corrupt a bunch of them. I personally corrupted 6 of them on double corrupt chambers, and I got 1 to hit level 21. That's where you get 1 more projectile. Ultimately, for min-maxing, that's a good way to go, but it also takes time to farm those Doriani's Catalyst Corruption Chambers, and you have to buy the jewels and level them up to 20 quality of them and stuff. There's a little bit more min-maxing to do there, a little bit more effort, and a little bit more expense, obviously. So, anyways, this is the character on 14x versus the other character where I spent about 50x putting it together. I think I can still cut more off the character. I still think I can make it cheaper from here, so I might do one more video where I try to go just bare bones, absolute minimum expense level. I want to see how cheap I can make this and see how viable it is. And we'll do maybe one more of those videos to say, okay, at the bare minimum, this is what it is functional with this amount of currency type of thing. But after that, I will then be doing a full guide on the character, of course. I'm going to be writing up all the techniques of decrafting each item, the progression, all that sort of stuff I'm going to include in the POB. Everybody liked it with the Righteous Fire character, so I want to do a lot of that with this character, put all the effort in type of deal. So I'm going to work towards getting that done as soon as possible. I can't promise it'll be super quick, but I am going to try to get it out as fast as I can, obviously. Thank you guys for watching. As always, I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one, Exiles. Peace out.